This week is going to be a slightly different video, mainly because I barely coded this week. There's not really going to be a computer section, but there will be some screenshots and screen recordings. This week I've actually had a few interviews, which is why I've not coded that much. So I'll be going over them and the areas of questions they kind of asked me. And I also replanned Battleships, so I'll be going over that plan in a bit more detail. Welcome to this series where I show you what I am doing to try to become a web developer. My name is Craig and this is week 34. Let's dive right in to see how much time I've spent on web development this week. The total time is 21 hours and that's broken up as 5 hours for tutorials, 6 hours 15 for projects, and then the chunk of time was 9 hours 45 for career stuff. The tutorials was mainly finishing this .NET course I was taking to prepare for the interview, just to get a brief understanding of what .NET was. I didn't get that much out of the course, so I definitely want to spend a little bit more time going over stuff like that. In terms of the project, that was mostly Battleships plus writing another article on my WordPress site. So first up is Battleships. Now, if you'd watched my previous videos, you may have been able to tell that I haven't been that happy with how I've progressed with it so far. So I spent a good chunk of time, like a whole morning or something like that, just sitting down. I've got about 4 or 5 pages here of just writing down my plans, thoughts, everything like that. It was really good to just sit down and plan it a little bit more. The instructions for starting the Battleships project is to build the ship factory function, run some tests, build a game board, run some tests. And that's totally fine because this project is to help you understand how to do tests and unit testing. So I haven't really done too much on that side of things when I was doing my plan. How I've approached it this time is actually more about the user journey and user experience. So in my mind, there are 4 screens the user needs to go through. The first one is the introduction, where they add in their username. The second one is where they place the ships. The third one is going to be the main screen, and that's where they battle against the AI. And then the fourth screen is game over. The first screen hasn't been too bad. I've kind of already built that. It's a simple, got the battleship's name. It's got an input field and a button to go to the next screen. I want to add a little bit more in terms of validation and improve how I'm displaying the validation for the user input. Basically, all I need is the username needs to be greater than 3 characters. The game over screen, the last one, I haven't built it yet, but again, that's going to be quite a simple screen. So it's going to tell you who the winner is, how many ships they have remaining, and then it's going to have 2 buttons. One for a rematch, and the second one is to start a new player, so a new username. In my mind, I want to keep the rematch button more prominent as a way to keep the user on the game a little bit more, I guess. The second screen, this is where the user is going to place their ships. I have made some progress on this. There are a few issues. So right now it doesn't actually initiate the game board correctly, but I've made it so that a user can click on a ship to change the direction and can drag it on to the game board. The game board is actually a HTML canvas element, so that was quite interesting to use. It's a little bit different, but it's quite nice. There are a few issues that I want to iron out on this screen. First up, I want to check the placement of the ships before it does actually get placed. Right now, it is possible to overlap ships or to actually have them slightly off the canvas element. I also need to create an object to store information about where the ships are placed. This is going to have the ship length, the direction, and the initial coordinates of the ship. This is so I can initiate the game board properly for screen 3. Screen 3, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm still kind of thinking it over in my mind a little bit. But this is the main screen. It's going to be where there's 2 game boards, the players and the AIs, and you're going to take turns attacking. I do think it's a good idea to have a key at the top. So I'm going to have a key which shows if a shot has missed a boat, if it's hit a boat, and if the boat has been sunk. So I think that will help. Next up is the interviews, and honestly, I never know how well I've done in an interview. Generally, as a person, I'm really positive and optimistic. I know that doesn't really come across on this camera because I'm quite hard on myself at the same time. But when it comes to interviews, I'm just really pessimistic. Like, that was the worst thing that I've done. But we'll see what happens. The first interview was off the back of a coding challenge I completed. It was an hour and a half long interview with 5 people interviewing me, which was a little bit daunting, I'll be honest. It was over Microsoft Teams. Quite a range of questions, really. They were very interested in my degree in mathematics, a little bit about my background. There was technical and some behavioral questions, and there was a good chunk of time going over the coding challenge. The role was a full stack web developer, front and back end, but it was also kind of blending into an analyst role, which is why I think they were quite interested in my maths degree. In terms of some of the technical questions, this company predominantly uses .NET, which is why I was doing the tutorial earlier in the week. I didn't have that much knowledge, so there was a few questions I couldn't fully answer there. But there was things like explain the MVC, describe what object-oriented programming is, a few things like that. We also went over my project, described my thought process and why I did some things there. Then the coding challenge part of it was actually really nice to talk about the coding challenge with someone. I unfortunately had made a couple of mistakes, which if I had done more testing database side of things, I probably would have caught it, but I was mostly focused on the R side of things. A bit of feedback they gave me was that they would have liked to have seen how I set up the database. So I created the database using MySQL, I believe it was, on my PC. And I just set that up using the terminal, and I created the table using the terminal as well. So they just wanted to see how I set that up. After walking through the code, my thought process on why I did certain things, he then asked, well, this was only a sample file. So would your code handle a larger file? If not, what would you do differently? So I thought that was a great question. I joked on saying, well, apart from rewriting my entire code, they quite liked that. I did say one possibility was to split the file out into smaller chunks to allow the computer to process it a little bit faster. This does mean it would contact the database a little bit more, so there's pros and cons there. In terms of my code actually handling the file, I said probably not. This was due to R being very RAM intensive, and it was likely cause a bottleneck if I was sending this huge file through. But that was the first interview. The second interview was an hour long with 2 people, again over Microsoft Teams. I did have a small technical issue at the very end with Teams. It disconnected, and then when it reconnected, I lost the audio. I had to leave and rejoin again, which was slightly embarrassing. But this interview, it's going to be weird to say, it was a really nice conversation. I know that's a bit of an odd thing to say about an interview maybe, but it was just really good chatting to these 2 people interviewing me. So they went over a bit about the company and the role. This one was actually a junior software developer. They were very interested in my background, a bit about my previous careers, why I changed careers, talking a bit about my projects and things like that. I do actually have another interview with them coming up this Monday, in fact, so very quickly. This one is going to be more of a technical interview. They said mostly around SQL and web development. So this weekend I am brushing up a little bit more on my SQL and a few more practice questions with web development. But that is basically week 34. Next week, as I said, I've got the interview on Monday. Apart from that, I think next week I'm going to focus a lot on Battleships. Links to all the resources will be down below if you want to go check them out. And as always, I would greatly appreciate your thoughts and advice. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see more, please smash that subscribe button down below. Hope you all have a good day, and I'll catch you later.